Hey geographers, Coach Fishbein here. We're going to go over Unit 6 of the AP Human Geography course today, talking about cities and urban land use. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right. First, we got to talk about site. All right. When we're talking about site, I want you to think about the context of a certain place. Okay. We're located in San Diego. That's where I'm from. That's where my school's at. So a lot of these images relate to San Diego, and I want to start our conversation talking about the site for the city of San Diego. If there's anything you know about San Diego, it's probably that we have fantastic weather. As you can see in this chart right here, which shows the average temperature, the highs and the lows, for all 12 months of the year. And as you can see, we never dip below 65 on the high, never go above 77. So it's a pretty great place to live from a climate perspective. All right. Also, in the summer, as you can see down here on this chart, we get very little rainfall. All right. And if you're a person like me who doesn't really like the rain, then that's really good news for you. All right. So the weather for a place is going to be one of those site factors. All right. Another site factor might be what's around there. Like what natural resources could people in that city make use of? And the big ones that we have here in San Diego are both the Pacific Ocean and then San Diego Bay, which is adjacent to our downtown area and really adjacent to most of the southern part of the county. Okay. So those are some site factors. All right. So if site is context, then situation would be connections. All right. What is a place close to? What does a place have access to in the surrounding area? For San Diego, it would be Los Angeles to the north and Tijuana to the south. All right. I could guess you could maybe say the Pacific Ocean as well. We do have some ships, namely our Navy base, that makes access to the Pacific Ocean as well. But as far as situation goes, the two big cities to our north and our south are Los Angeles and Tijuana. All right, let's get to changes. All right, one of the big things that you got to know for this unit is that changes in lots of different areas lead to various effects on urbanization. All right, one of those changes is transportation. Right, when San Diego first started out, we didn't have freeways, we didn't have cars, we didn't have airplanes. But as those technologies were adopted at a large scale, it can change the way that cities work from an urbanization perspective, namely like kind of spreading them out, pushing them out from an urban core. Okay. Changes in communication can also change urbanization. Before the coronavirus pandemic, you would see a lot of people working in these downtown areas in what we call these central business districts. Okay. But because of the pandemic, we're making use of technology like Zoom, Meet, and Teams, and those people might not need to come to a central business district to go to work anymore. So it remains to be seen as to what kind of effect this is going to have on our cities as we move, hopefully at least, towards the end of this pandemic and into a post-pandemic world. Okay. Changes in population can lead to urbanization changes. Got this picture of this stork right here. The stork, obviously, a symbol of fertility. And this stork in particular is a statue on the top of the parking structure at Mary Birch Hospital in San Diego, where my son was born. Economic development can lead to changes, as can migration and government policies. Right here, you have an example of NIMBYism, right? NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. And what you see here in this image is some local San Diegans protesting against the proposed raising of the height limit in a neighborhood called Bay Park. All right, let's talk about mega cities and meta cities. All right, so you'll see this GIF right here is showing you the world's 20 most populated cities from 2010 to 2100. Okay, as it starts, there's a pretty wide concentration of mega cities, and we're defining mega cities as any city that has at least 10 million people. And as we get, and obviously these are projections, but as we get closer to the year 2100, you see more and more of these cities leaving what we would call the core area, which I'm going to use just shorthand right now, but most of North America, the vast majority of Europe, and a few Asian countries like Japan, maybe South Korea, and also probably Australia. So lots of those mega cities are no longer in the core, and they're mostly now in the developing world, as you can see right there in the image for 2100. Okay. Also by 2100, you're going to see that all of those cities become meta cities. All right. Meta cities are cities with at least 20 million people, so twice as big as a mega city. And by 2100, these cities are actually going to blow by 20 million people, getting up towards 80 million people. It's a lot of people. Okay. All right. Now we have this hierarchy of cities. All right. And the cities that everyone knows and everyone heard of, and the cities whose landmarks you know off the top of your head, like New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, they're at the top of our global hierarchy. All right. And then there's a lot of cities kind of a few levels down from there. All right. And there's no like commonly accepted hierarchy where you know exactly at what level every city is. But the important thing for you to know is that these cities are connected, all right? Think back to globalization, which we talked about in Unit 1, at least in my class. Globalization is the growing interconnectedness of the world. And a lot of how that happens is through these world cities, all right? Again, this isn't like a hard and fast image. Lots of other cities, you could argue might be a world city, but those cities have a profound effect on how our society functions, and they are at the top of our hierarchy for lots of different things, including globalization and urbanization. So it's important for you to know that these world cities kind of dictate a lot of how our society functions today. All right. So let's get into this is like Unit 4. There's a whole bunch of terms here. So let's go get into a couple of them. All right. So this is the neighborhood where I teach. This is Eastlake. And Eastlake is a suburban neighborhood. All right. You see, this isn't a central business district. There's no big skyscrapers here. There's no seat of industry or of government or anything like that here. It's just, winding roads, cul-de-sacs, single family homes, lots of parks, lots of places where you would typically find people raising families. This is what we call a suburb. All right. And this process is called suburbanization, where we're kind of moving away from the city in order mostly to use major freeways to get back to the city core. But people in the United States, most typically, are more than willing to raise their families away from the urban core and in neighborhoods like suburbs. All right. Now, this can lead to sprawl, right? So this is the southern end of our neighborhood of Eastlake. And you see it's kind of like encroaching on this area in the back of the image, right? This part of San Diego County isn't really anything. It's kind of wild. It's just like mountains and canyons, all right? But as development keeps on happening, as suburbanization keeps on happening, the sprawl of our community is expanding southward, okay? And that's what you can see in this image right here. And we'll get into some pros and cons of sprawl here in a little bit, okay? And all of this ties back to this idea of decentralization, okay? On this map, you see the city council districts for the city of San Diego. Those are the colored areas, all right? But surrounding the city of San Diego and the colored areas, all right, these other regions that are not colored, those are 15 of the 17 other cities that make up San Diego County, okay? So as these cities organize and as more and more people leave the urban core of San Diego and move to places like Chula Vista or Escondido or Carlsbad or even Oceanside, which is even further north than what you can see on the map, you see this process of decentralization, okay? And this leads to an idea called edge cities, which we'll get to here in a second, all right? Now, flashback really quick. Let's do bid rent theory. Do you remember this from Unit 5? Let's go back to my Jamboard right here. And even though we're not talking about von Thunen right now, the bid rent theory is still a focal point of our urbanization unit, okay? Now, instead of thinking about dairying and forestry and grain farming and cows and sheep and livestock, I want you to just think about where land is the most expensive. So in this case, our blue area, right? The cost of land is going to be closest right here to the city center, right? Maybe you could cross out this market right here and think of central business district instead, right? That's going to be our retail area. Retail stores are going to take advantage of people who are going to be able to walk into their store and spend their money there. So they're going to be closest to the city center, all right? Next level out might be industry. And then further out from there, we just talked about suburbanization. Those might be families. Those might be residents. And then the red area might be our rural area, okay? So this bid rent theory, even though we're not talking about von Thunen anymore, still plays a really big role in how urbanization happens around the world, okay? Main thing you got to know there is that the land is most expensive nearest the city center, nearest the core, nearest the the central business district. And for some entities, that's going to be fine. They're willing to pay that price, but not everybody is, so they're willing to move out further away from the city. All right. Next slide. Next slide. Here we go. All right. Now let's get to edge cities. Okay. I mentioned Chula Vista right here, right? So this is the community where I grew up. This is the community where I teach. And this is an example of an edge city, right? It's kind of on the periphery of San Diego County, which you can see here, right? Other examples of edge cities: Oceanside, Carlsbad, Escondido, out in East County, El Cajon and La Mesa might be examples as well. They're cities that are urbanizing at a quick rate away from the city center, right? San Diego is still the big city in this region, right? Everything happens through San Diego, but these edge cities are attracting more and more people as the land is a little bit cheaper out there. It's what some might say is a great place to raise a family, and especially as we experience more decentralization, more and more amenities are moving out there as well. So you're really seeing a lot of these people move out to these edge cities. Okay. All right. Now this leads to boom burbs. All right. Here we have in San Diego, we love city signs, right? We love these arch signs over some of our streets. This is in downtown Chula Vista. This one is in Escondido. And boom burbs are these suburban cities that are growing very, very rapidly. All right. Like Escondido, like Chula Vista. All right. And ExSRBs are also like suburban areas, but they're typically a little bit more wealthy, typically a little bit more rural. This is an image of a community called Bonsall, which is in San Diego's North County, very close towards Riverside County. And you can see some pretty nice homes in this community, and it's a lot slower of a pace. You can get more land out here, and there's some more rural activity as well. All right, so those are excerpts. All right, let's get into how we kind of classify cities. Okay, first thing we got to talk about is a rank size rule. Okay, so let's take Brazil for example. In Brazil, Sao Paulo is the largest city. All right, over close to 12.5 million people. Okay. Now, what rank size rule is going to tell us is that countries who follow this model, the largest city is going to be however large the largest city is. The second largest city is going to be half as large. The third largest city is going to be a third as large as the largest city. The fourth largest city is going to be a fourth of as large as the largest city, and so on. And you kind of see that here with Brazil. Okay. It's very different than what we would call primate city. Okay, Mexico is an example of a country that is a primate city. Okay, and that's where one city in particular is just way bigger than every other city. All right, and you see that here with Mexico City, close to 10 million people. The next closest city is our neighbor to the south, Tijuana, which is less than 3 million people. Okay, so primate city is a city that is just way significantly larger than every other city in that country. All right, let's get into the gravity model. Okay. I mean, can I throw something at the ground? Watch my phone, right? Pulled down to the earth because of gravity. Don't ask me to teach you physics. We're doing geography. But you still kind of see a gravity model between cities in human geography, okay? Obviously, the most major city in our entire country is New York City, right? So if you were to compare Lincoln, Nebraska and Charlotte, North Carolina, what kind of connection are those two cities going to have between New York or each other? You see that these arrows are bigger connecting back to New York, right? Because there's people in Lincoln and Charlotte who might be going to New York for class field trips. They might be going there to learn about American history. They might be watching television shows that take place in New York City, like Friends, How I Met Your Mother. I could go on forever with those television shows. There's just a very large connection between New York City and really the rest of the country, the rest of the world, right? The connection between Lincoln, Nebraska and Charlotte, North Carolina, very, very small. So that's how you see the very thin arrows between those two cities right here. All right, let's get into Kristoller's central place theory, okay? You see these hexagons in central place theory. Okay, hexagons are a great compromise between the compactness of a circle, right, where all edges of a circle are an equal distance to the center, and a square which is able to like nest on top of each other, right? This is the one shape that kind of splits the difference between those shapes. So that's why geographers really like using hexagons, okay? In this model, you'll see the big red dot is our city, okay? There's only one city. So in central place theory, central place theory is going to tell us that people are going to go to the city for certain amenities, all right? In San Diego, there's certain things that you can only do in downtown San Diego, right? You can only go see the San Diego Padres play at their ballpark in downtown San Diego, okay? You can only go visit Balboa Park in downtown San Diego. You can only get a marriage license at the county administration building in downtown San Diego. Those services, you don't really use them very much. So it makes sense that they're all located within a central business district, okay? Some services you use all the time, right? For me, I always think about getting gas, all right? We live in Southern California. Everybody's driving cars here. Everybody's on the freeway all the time. So you're going to see a lot of gas stations everywhere. So I would say that the gas stations, you might see gas stations in a place in like this little light blue teal color, which we see as a village here on the key, okay? Because we need that service all the time, right? The range for a gas station is a lot different than the range for a game with the San Diego Padres, okay? So that's what central place theory is kind of telling us. You're going to see some services only located in the city. Some services might be in smaller urban areas like a town. I might envision those as kind of like edge cities. Market towns are smaller than those, and villages are smaller than those, right? I know that your home probably doesn't have towns, market towns, and villages, but your home probably has a major city. You might have a suburban area. You might have a downtown area or a strip mall for a smaller suburban town. Think about how you would apply central place theory to where you live. All right. Now let's get into a bunch of city models. Okay. The first one we got is the Burgess concentric zone model. All right. Not the von Thunen model, but it should look pretty familiar. We have these concentric rings on top of each other. Okay. You can read the key, but everything evolves around the central business district. Okay. Now, all of these models have some kind of assumption, some kind of just things that we're going to assume about this place. All right. If we're looking at the Burgess concentric zone model from a critical lens, well, my city isn't in a place where you can have a perfect circle, right? We have the ocean on one side. We have another country on another side. We have deserts and mountains on another side. One of the second largest city in the entire country is to the north of us. This concentric zone model is not going to be perfect for every place. And for one reason is that it doesn't really take into account things like physical features. And it's really kind of based on how the world was in the United States in particular about 100 years ago. Okay. The Hoyt sector model is very similar to the concentric zone model, but instead of rings on top of rings, we have these wedges that are kind of expanding outward from the central business district. Okay. Now, this model was really good at explaining how cities were being laid out in the very early 20th century when we had things like streetcars and railroads as our primary methods of transportation. Okay. When was the last time you were on a streetcar? When was the last time you got on a train? For me, it's been a long time since I did either of those things. And that's even before the pandemic, right? This model doesn't really take into account 21st century transportation methods, but it's a pretty good example of how our urban geographers thought about the world about 100 years ago again. All right. Another classical model is called the Harris-Muehlman multiple nuclei model. Okay. I like this one because it admits that we usually have more than one central business district. Okay. Right out here, this outlying business district in zone 7, that's kind of like an edge city, right? This could be a Chula Vista. This could be an Escondido. This could be an Oceanside. Okay. So I like the multiple nuclei model because it admits that you have these lots of different nodes within the city. Not everything is in the central business district. In San Diego, some examples might be those edge cities or other places that even might be within the city of San Diego, like San Diego State University, UC San Diego, the La Jolla neighborhood. All right. Lots of these institutions are not in our urban core, are in other parts of our region, and it's going to attract residential areas and manufacturing areas around those other places. All right. This one was made by Pierce Lewis. I don't know why his name didn't get into the course, an exam description, but I wanted to shout out Pierce Lewis. He came up with the galactic city model. And the one thing you'll notice with the galactic city model is that you got this radial highway going around the city. Okay, cities like Phoenix, Arizona, like Atlanta, Georgia, they have these highways that kind of go around the larger urban core. Okay, San Diego, we don't have that because, again, we got the ocean, right? So we have some big freeways that go north and south that connect you from place to place in that way. But the galactic city model does a really good job of explaining those places that have a lot of times they're kind of landlocked, or maybe they'll only have like a river running through them. But if you've got that space where you can connect everything around that galactic city model or along that radial highway, this model does a really good job of explaining all that. All right. Now, the next three models are meant to explain places that are not in the United States. Okay. The Latin American city model is the first one. And the distinctive item here is the spine. If you've ever been to Mexico City, you might be familiar with Avenida Revolucion. No, I'm sorry, La Reforma. I'm confusing Mexico City and Tijuana. I'm sorry. But the spine, it's a long road that goes through the CBD, through the market, out towards better housing, and then on the opposite side, out over towards the industrial park, right? And that's the one thing I would pick out of this model is that the higher quality housing, the upper class areas of a city are probably not going to want to be next to an industrial center. Okay, so we can kind of see how in this model it suggests some type of segregation within our cities. Okay, next one is the Southeast Asian city model. Okay, I like this one because down here in the bottom of the model, is this the South? Maybe, I guess so. But you got the port zone, right? If you think about the world map, Southeast Asia, there's a lot of water down there, right? Lots of islands, lots of connections between places making use of that Southern Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, right? And this model really does a good job of explaining that with the port zone. Okay. And then the last model we got is the African city model. All right. This is an example of colonialism. You have the colonial CBD here in the purple, very regimented. You got those straight lines going north and south and east and west. And that's going to be different from the traditional CBD or the non-colonial CBD, which is not really making use of straight lines like you have in the colonial CBD. All right. Does that tell you something maybe about how these geographers thought about non-colonial people, colonized people? It tells me something about that. And then you have the open air market in this region as well. So you have three CBDs essentially all together here. All right. And then you have ethnic neighborhoods, ethnic and mixed neighborhoods. You'll notice that they are not in the same places. So again, these models are starting to suggest that we do have some sort of segregation going on in our cities. All right. Let's get into density here. Okay. So this is an image of downtown San Diego, the East Village neighborhood. This is going to be a high density area. See how high we're building these buildings? Some of them are hotels. Some of them are condos and apartment complexes, but this is our urban core. This is our central business district, all right? Bid rent theory is going to tell us that this land is expensive, so we want to get more bang for our buck, so we're going to build it up, okay? A medium density area might be Eastlake, right, where I grew up, where I work, and this is a more suburban area. Land's a little bit cheaper. You can spread out, right? You don't need to build as many apartment complexes. And you have room for a nice man-made lake here and a little lagoon. This is where I would play when I was a little kid. And this would be a medium density area. A low density area might be a more rural area, like you can see down here. Okay, so high, medium, and low. All right, let's get into infrastructure. Infrastructure can be a lot of different things. Okay, it can be gas and electricity. It could be police. It could be schools. It could be healthcare. It could be fire, roads. But infrastructure is necessary to make a city run, okay? And some of these entities are run by the city of San Diego, and some of them are not. Some of them are run by other entities, okay? And every city has a different mix of how they're providing these amenities to make their cities function, okay? And we'll get into fragmentation here in a moment. All right, let's talk about some urban sustainability, all right? I mean, if you're going to have up to 80 million people living in the same city, you better be doing it in a sustainable way, or else it's just going to cause havoc on our planet, going to cause havoc from an expense standpoint. So some of these trends are geared towards making our cities more sustainable. All right, we got mixed land use. The most common feature of mixed land use is that you see retail down here on the ground floor, and then you see housing on top of that. All right. Walkability is a big one. Getting people out of those cars that are very bad for the environment. All right. Making a city walkable is making a city more sustainable. We got transportation-oriented development. So putting things that people are going to use next to transportation lines. I think San Diego could do a better job at this. But this is a good example here in this image where you got this apartment complex right next to this rail line. Okay, smart growth policies is another example. This is in Shanghai where you got this elevated walkway above the street level where the cars are going. So it's kind of like you're making double use of that land. New urbanism is another school of thought here, where kind of like it draws upon mixed land use, kind of draws upon smart growth, and really just kind of creating that village feel. Okay, green belts are an example of really like really good land use policies where we're trying to create these belts of green areas around the city center. All right, in this case, you see London on this map has the green belt. All right, so they're kind of limiting their urban expanse at where that green belt is. And then you have slow growth policies. This is Boulder, Colorado down over here. You can see that they're trying to limit themselves from expanding, from sprawling out into this mountainous area over here. That's what we would call a slow growth policy. All right. These urban design initiatives have lots of pros and cons. If they're done well, they're going to reduce sprawl. All right. See, this is San Diego again. See how it's kind of getting up into these non-urban areas. Good urban design initiatives try to limit that as much as possible. Livability is a factor. Do you see yourself living there? Are you comfortable? Are the things that you're going to want to do close by and accessible? Diverse housing options. Are you putting apartment complexes near single-family homes, near more expensive homes, near more affordable homes? And then we got walkability down there again as well. All right, cons of urban design initiatives. Sometimes these urban design initiatives get very, very desirable. So people want to pay to live there so it can increase housing costs, which could be a pretty big problem for people who are down in the lower parts of our income pyramid. Okay, de facto segregation is another issue. We'll talk more about redlining here in a moment, and also loss of historical place or character. All right, if we're cutting down or destroying the places that are making our cities unique or making our cities, like full of character and unique cities unlike other places around the world, then that would be a hallmark of a not very good urban design initiative. All right, let's talk briefly about quantitative data. Okay, so how do we know what we should do in a city? How do we know if we should take this area and build housing? Should it be single family housing? Should it be a park? Should it be a school? Should it be a university? Well, one of the ways we try to answer questions like that is by using quantitative data. All right. The best example of quantitative data is the census. All right. In the United States, we do a census every 10 years. We did one just last year in 2020. And the Census Bureau is going to go around and try to figure out how many people are here in our country. They're going to try to count everybody. All right. Most people, like me, they just did it on their phones for like 5 minutes with a little survey, and that was it. But people in those hard to reach places like the Alaskan islands out in the northern Pacific Ocean, they might even send people out there to talk to those people. All right. So counting everybody is a form of quantitative data through the census. But then cities do this as well. It's not just our federal government. The city of San Diego does surveys where they try to gather as much data as possible. All right. Now, they're not limited to quantitative data. They can do things like field studies or even just interview people and try to get narratives to try to get what we call qualitative data. All right. Data that doesn't necessarily have a number on it, but it's still useful nonetheless. All right. Let's talk about some discriminatory housing policies. We got redlining is our first example. Okay. In the early part of the 20th century, the Federal Housing Administration and the Homeowners Loan Corporation, I mean, there's a population boom, right? People coming back from Europe from the war, lots of desire to amongst those veterans to start their own families, and the government was giving out home loans, right? and they did so in a flat out racist way. All right, where these red areas were typically minority neighborhoods, typically African American neighborhoods, and they were colored red on these maps. And the FHA and the HOLC would be much less likely to give those people buying homes in these areas really good loans, or sometimes even any loans at all. All right, so redlining has had a great negative effect on inequality in our country today. All right, it also led to blockbusting. Right, blockbusting is when a realtor or a group of realtors are trying to take advantage of this racism, essentially. Whereas some realtors might go to a white neighborhood and even try to scare those white tenants or white homeowners and say, this is becoming an African American neighborhood, this is becoming a Hispanic neighborhood, you probably want to sell your home now. So those realtors would actually be the ones that those homeowners would sell to, and then those realtors would go out again and then sell those homes to African Americans or to Mexican Americans or whatever minority community, right? Taking advantage of this desire for these white people to leave, mostly towards the suburbs in a phenomenon we call white flight, and then taking advantage of the very small demand or the very small supply, that these African Americans had in terms of housing. All right, so that's blockbusting. All right, and this leads to lots of negative effects, like inequitable access to resources. This is how I would sum up this entire thing. But we have segregated school districts, we have increases in crime, even environmental effects, right? You see this is the city of Oakland over here, and you see those same colors, right, from that previous map, blue, green, yellow, and red. You'll see the blue and green areas, which are the areas where they gave the best loans. In Oakland, those are the areas that are the highest, most highly elevated. All right, they have the highest topography, so they have really good views, increasing their home values. Whereas these red areas are next to industry, they're very low lying. It's more difficult to build homes there. So even environmental inequities could result as a result of blockbusting and redlining. All right, disamenity zones. Okay, when you don't have land tenure, when you don't have a legal right to your land, it can create these disamenity zones. And this is an example from Rio de Janeiro. All right, this is a favela in Rio de Janeiro. All right, the city of Rio de Janeiro has put no effort at creating infrastructure in this area. Okay, so the people are on their own. They have to figure it out themselves. Right, they don't have any land tenure, but no one's coming in and really like doing anything about it. So they create these very densely packed communities and just kind of like string things together. Like you see all these power lines down here at the bottom part of this image. And they're just doing their best to try to get power, to get water, to have a plumbing system. And this is an example of one of these disamenity zones. Okay, it could also lead to zones of abandonment, which are what they sound like, places where we don't see people living there anymore. And it could also lead to just more general squatter settlement. So this is an example of slums in Mumbai in India. Okay. All right. Now, ways to fight against those discriminatory housing policies are inclusionary zoning. Okay, trying to zone your city so that it's more inclusive of people who might not have the most money, people who don't have the wealth to purchase a very expensive home. Another example might be local food movements, just trying to empower those people to take advantage of the food that's locally grown within their community. Okay. Urban renewal. All right. So this is an image of San Diego, but not as it is today. Okay. I actually forgot to look up exactly when this image was created, when this photograph was taken, but this is what it looks like now. All right. You see this process of urban renewal happening in a lot of the world's cities, where we're trying to renew these cities, trying to build them up again so people want to live there, so people have a reason to move back to the central business district, where we can be a little bit more efficient with how our cities are laid out. Now, this could also lead to gentrification. All right, this is a community a little bit north from where I live called North Park in San Diego. Okay, the North Park Theater. This is what it looked like several decades ago. This is what it looks like now. Right, pretty nice place, pretty cool community. I like hanging out in North Park. Okay, now one of the criticisms though is that this community is very highly gentrified. Okay, it is very appealing to, you might have heard the term yuppies, young urban professionals like me. I would say that I might be a yuppie, right? I'm young. I'm an urban professional, right? This is going to be a place where I want to live. All right, lots of cool things to do, lots of coffee shops, lots of nice restaurants, close to public transportation. The 805 is just down the street right here. It's really great for someone like me who has the means to buy a home in this neighborhood or in a surrounding community, but not so great for maybe minority people who are getting priced out of this community. All right, and that's what we call gentrification. All right, I mentioned fragmentation of governments. How do we solve these problems in a city? All right, one of the issues that these cities face in being able to solve these problems is that our government is very fragmented, right? Some areas are run by the state of California, some by the county of San Diego, some by the city of San Diego. Some areas are run by like a completely different entity, like a school district or a water authority, or our transportation is run by an organization called MTS. So this fragmentation of governments really makes it hard to solve some of these problems. Okay. All right, just a couple more slides here. We got some challenges to sustainability as a result of urbanization, right? We need to try to reduce our sprawl. If we just keep on expanding out forever, we're going to run into areas where things like wildfires might be more common, all right? What are we doing to keep our areas clean? Our places sanitary? Sanitation is a problem. Air quality, water quality, how we use our energy, and climate change could be a challenge as well, all right? But we're able to respond to these challenges in lots of different ways, either by a regional planning effort in which governments come together to plan big institutions like an airport, remediation of brownfields. What brownfields are areas that are kind of been tainted by some sort of pollution or some sort of toxic waste, and we're trying to remediate those areas and try to turn them back into a place where people want to live or people want to work. All right. We can establish growth boundaries, like we mentioned before, with Boulder, Colorado, and make sure that we're not encroaching on our farmland, so that we have things like green belts and wild green areas for people to enjoy. All right. That's it for Unit 6. One take. That's fantastic. First time I've ever done that. Sun's going down, so we're going to wrap it up here. Don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe. We're going to be back here with a Unit 7 video here in a couple of weeks. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at CoachFish_. Follow me on Twitter at CoachFish_. Send me your questions with what you want to see as far as review goes as we get closer to the exam. My students are taking it May 28th. If you're one of those May 4th people, good luck. You're going to be first up. If you're one of those June 10th people? June 8th people? June 10th people. You got a long time to study. So make sure you use that time wisely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me. Have a great day. Have a great spring break. We'll see you in the Unit 7 video here in a couple weeks. All right. Bye, everyone.